Michael Cohen will be testifying once again tomorrow at a closed session of the House Intelligence Committee, and Michael Cohen's lawyer, Lanny Davis, will be our first guest tonight. When Michael Cohen speaks, investigators around the country take notes and go to work. The New York Times is reporting tonight that New York State insurance regulators are now investigating President Trump and his company because of Michael Cohen's answers to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
President ever provide inflated assets to an insurance company?
Yes.
Who else knows that the president did this?
Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
The New York Times is reporting, quote, New York State regulators have issued an expansive subpoena to the Trump Organization's longtime insurance broker, the first step in an investigation of insurance policies and claims involving President Trump's family business, according to a person briefed on the matter. The New York Times also reports that the 9-page subpoena demands a broad range of materials dating back to 2009. The subpoena demands copies of all communications between an insurance broker and Donald Trump and the Trump Organization. State and federal investigators are not the only ones who found Michael Cohen's testimony credible enough to require further investigation. A new Quinnipiac poll shows that 50% of voters believe Michael Cohen now more than they believe President Trump, with only 35% believe President Trump more than they believe Michael Cohen. That same Quinnipiac poll shows that 64% of voters believe that President Trump committed crimes before he took office. Only 24% do not believe the president committed crimes before he took office. 45% of voters believe that the president has committed crimes while in office. 43% do not believe that the president has committed crimes while in office. Michael Cohen provided the House Oversight Committee evidence that President Trump has indeed committed crimes, both before he took office during his presidential campaign and while in office as president. That evidence came in the form of checks delivered to Michael Cohen from President Trump, including one that was signed in the White House by the president. Michael Cohen testified that those checks were part of an illegal payoff scheme to Stormy Daniels to buy her silence about her affair with Donald Trump during the presidential campaign.
In February of 2017, 1 month into his presidency, I'm visiting President Trump in the Oval Office for the first time. And he says to me something to the effect of, "Don't worry, Michael. Your January and February reimbursement checks are coming." They were FedExed from New York, and it takes a while for that to get through the White House system. As he promised, I received the first check for the reimbursement of $70,000 not long thereafter.
Here is that February check for $70,000, which covered 2 months of the agreed-upon payment of $35,000 a month to Michael Cohen to reimburse him for the money that he paid to Stormy Daniels. Note that this check came from the Donald J. Trump Trust account, the trust account. That check is signed by the Trump chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, and Donald Trump Jr. Michael Cohen received another check with the same signatures from the same trust account a month later for his monthly payment of $35,000. And the check that Michael Cohen produced in last week's hearing with Donald Trump's signature was written 6 months into the Trump presidency and came from a different account, what appears to be a personal checking account of Donald J. Trump. The accounts used to pay these checks are an important element of this story, which we will explore in a moment with Michael Cohen's lawyer, Lanny Davis. One of the least important matters that Michael Cohen testified to last week was Donald Trump's desperate concern to keep his academic records from high school and college hidden from public view.
When I say con man, I'm talking about a man who declares himself brilliant, but directed me to threaten his high school, his colleges, and the college board to never release his grades or SAT scores. As I mentioned, I'm giving the committee today copies of a letter I sent at Mr. Trump's direction, threatening these schools with civil and criminal actions if Mr. Trump's grades or SAT scores were ever disclosed without his permission.
Fordham University has since confirmed that they were threatened to keep Donald Trump's college transcript hidden. The University of Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump transferred after Fordham, has made no public comment. And the Washington Post is reporting tonight that friends of Donald Trump tried to seize his high school records in 2011, right after Donald Trump said that he wanted President Obama to, quote, show his records because Donald Trump believed that Barack Obama was, quote, a terrible student.
The word is, according to what I've read, that he was a terrible student when he went to Occidental. Now, maybe that's right or maybe it's wrong, but I don't know why he doesn't release his records.
It's against the law for schools to publicly release students' transcripts, but Ivy League schools like the University of Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump graduated, and Harvard, where Barack Obama graduated from law school, do make public records of the students who graduate with honors. And in Ivy League schools, most students actually graduate with honors. Not graduating with honors is unusual in Ivy League schools. There are 3 levels of honors, of course: cum laude, the lowest, magna cum laude, and summa cum laude, the highest honors. Donald Trump did not graduate with honors from the University of Pennsylvania. That is public information. And that puts him somewhere in the bottom half of his class academically, even though the president once claimed to have graduated as the #1 student in his class. Barack Obama did graduate from Harvard Law School, magna cum laude. Last night, at this hour, we had the breaking news report by the Wall Street Journal that Michael Cohen's lawyers discussed the possibility of a pardon with President Trump's lawyers. The Wall Street Journal reported that Rudy Giuliani, quote, left open the possibility that the president could grant Mr. Cohen one in the future. Here's what Michael Cohen said about a pardon last week.
My testimony certainly does not diminish the pain that I have caused my family and my friends. Nothing can do that. And I have never asked for, nor would I accept, a pardon from President Trump.
And leading off our discussion tonight is Lenny Davis, an attorney for Michael Cohen. Lenny Davis, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I want to start with the pardon, which we just introduced here. The Wall Street Journal reporting last night was not that Michael Cohen personally requested a pardon, but just that his lawyers at some point discussed the possibility of a pardon with President Trump's lawyers, and that Rudy Giuliani, for one, left open the possibility. Is that accurate reporting?
Yes, the time period is what needs to be stressed. Michael Cohen lied for Donald Trump for 10 years and is going to prison in part because of a lie to Congress, as well as the cover-up scheme that Donald Trump is still paying for, or was paying for, when you showed those checks. The statement that Michael made was after he made a decision, and I think I was part of that, when he decided to repudiate and express his shame for his prior lies, when he was certainly looking at the option of pardon, when they were dangling that as a way of, I think, luring people to stay within the tent. And then when he decided on July 2nd, 2018, I will not lie anymore, and he asked me to help him tell the truth. So that sentence, which I helped write, was about the time period after he decided, as we decided to call it, his turn to the truth. And at that point, he said to me, I want you to publicly say, I wouldn't accept a pardon if he begged me to take it. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes. And I went out publicly and I said he would never accept a pardon. And that was the reference intended by that sentence.
But why wouldn't he accept a pardon? Who has not accepted a pardon?
Well, I was doubtful when he said it to me. He was in a great stressful situation with a wife and 2 kids and looking at a prison sentence potentially. And he had lied for 10 years and was expressing shame to me. And I said, are you willing to say that publicly? And you have a deep hole, and you are a good man and a good father. But in order to win credibility, which I see from the polls he has won, you need to be willing to tell the truth and all the truth. And part of that is, would you accept a pardon to get out of this fix you're in from this man that you described as having done dirty deeds for 10 years? And he said to me, yes. And then he said, I want you to say that publicly. Maybe people will believe me. And I did.
And I want to get your reaction also to what we're seeing now as the expanding investigations. Michael Cohen speaks, and the requests for documents fly. It's hard to remember a congressional reaction like this to congressional testimony. Over 80 requests for documents from the White House, from Trump businesses, from other government entities, almost all of them coming out of Michael Cohen's testimony, which is continuing. As we know, there's going to be more Michael Cohen testimony tomorrow morning. Is that what you expected, knowing you knew in advance what Michael Cohen's testimony was going to be? Did you expect it to provoke this kind of follow-up?
I honestly did, but it's still more to come, because we had a list of subjects that was basically Michael Cohen's confession of him facilitating these subjects, or his memory of them. And one of them, for example, you mentioned the grades. He threatened a major educational institution with criminal sanctions if they released Donald Trump's grades. On another occasion, Michael said to the American people and to every serviceman and every rural American who considers themselves to be patriots, listen to this if you voted for Donald Trump. He said to Michael Cohen, don't say anything if people ask for proof of my bone spur that allowed me to not go to Vietnam. And then he said, quote, you've got to be stupid to go to Vietnam. And so Michael was forbidden to respond to reporters' questions about what turns out to be a fake assertion by him that he had a bone spur to get out of serving. At that point, Michael looked into the television camera, and right at that moment, he said, Mr. President, isn't it ironic? You said people have to be stupid to serve in Vietnam. You're now in Vietnam. Of course, in a failed negotiation with the North Korean leader. But that's the kind of thing that is going to encourage more investigations. He lied to the Secret Service. The Selective Service on his draft deferments, and almost everything in his testimony, if you reread it, is a subject area that will be grounds for further investigation.
I want to go to what one member of the committee called the smoking gun, and that was the check that Michael Cohen produced with the president's signature on it, written in August, so that's about 6 months into the Trump presidency, possibly signed on that desk in the Oval Office, because according to Michael Cohen's testimony, these checks had to be FedExed. We heard him say it, FedExed down to the White House so that the president himself could sign them. That was what the president told Michael Cohen in the Oval Office, according to Michael Cohen. I noticed, Lanny, that the one the president signed is not from a business account. It is not from a Trump company account. It simply has the name Donald J. Trump on it. That looks to me like a personal check. That would be a very odd source for a business payment. For if Michael Cohen is being retained by the business in a retainer agreement, it strikes me as odd that the Trump business isn't paying for those legal services.
Well, first of all, I'm a lawyer, and I always try to use the word alleged if we're talking about crime, because everybody's entitled to due process, including Donald Trump. But there is literally no way to dispute that he committed a crime. He not only wrote a personal check, but they invented a cover-up story that it was a retainer check. The word invented and fictional or bogus was not my opinion. It is a fact. There was no retainer agreement. It was a scheme concocted by Michael, by Donald Trump, and by Mr. Weisselberg as a way of avoiding tracing the payoff money, the hush money, to Stormy Daniels. The prosecutors and the U.S. government said that in the information statement on Michael's plea of guilt. There is no doubt that the word reimbursement was the reimbursement of Michael Cohen advancing the hush money. And who said the word reimbursement after Donald Trump denied knowing anything about the Stormy Daniels payment at all? Rudy Giuliani on television called it a reimbursement to Michael Cohen. So there are no facts in dispute that the President of the United States, as president, committed a felony. Literally, there's no way to dispute that statement. And I say that with the caution that alleged is a word you should always try to use when you're accusing somebody of a crime. I can't find the ability to use the word alleged because everything I just said to you, Lawrence, is an undisputed or undisputable fact that shows a felony, a conspiracy to pay hush money and to cover it up.
Well, two of the checks that we've seen so far, and apparently they're going to be more available for public inspection, but were signed by Alan Weisselberg and Donald Trump Jr., and those were taken from the trust account, and that is, as I understand it, the accounts that were set up that Donald Trump is not supposed to touch. It's supposed to be the separation of the Trump businesses from the Trump presidency. But Alan Weisselberg presumably has testified or been questioned by the FBI about this in New York City, since that's the office that has been prosecuting the Michael Cohen case. And Alan Weisselberg, do you know if he has taken the position that there was indeed a retainer agreement for Michael Cohen's legal services that this was payment for that had nothing to do with Stormy Daniels?
Well, that was the cover story, I know, because Mr. Weisselberg and Michael and Mr. Trump together decided that Michael needed to do it to avoid it being traced, because 2 or 3 days before an election that turned out to be very close and won by Mr. Trump, they did not want, after Access Hollywood, they did not want the story about an adult film star being subject to a hush money payment. So Mr. Weisselberg said, well, I can't afford it, and why don't you do it from your line of credit, Michael? But we don't want it traceable to the Trump organization. Now, to answer your question, Lawrence, Mr. Weisselberg was given limited immunity by the federal prosecutors in the Southern District for the testimony about this hush money scheme. Michael had to plead guilty. Mr. Weisselberg was given immunity, but it was limited immunity. And I don't know the answer to whether he told the prosecutors about this scheme and told the truth that there was never a retainer. This was a cover-up. But now the question is, his signing that check as implementing this hush money illegal scheme is a crime. And the question is, did he tell the federal prosecutors about the signing of these checks at the time he was granted limited immunity? That's something between him and his lawyer, but I'm sure there's a concern about that.
And Lenny, we all saw on television that there wasn't a single Republican who went anywhere near the smoking gun. They would not touch the smoking gun of the check signed by Donald Trump and the other check signed by Alan Weisselberg. And I know there has been testimony behind closed doors. Can you tell us if any Republicans have at any point challenged or questioned Michael Cohen at any point about these checks?
No. And I sat there not necessarily surprised that the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, many of them people that I respect and decent people, decent friends, decent parents, decent human beings, never once mentioned Donald Trump throughout the entire hearing. They pounded away at what Michael had already admitted to in shame, that he had lied for 10 years for Donald Trump, that he had lied to Congress, and he was going to prison paying the price. Not one member of the House Oversight Committee on the Republican side had the decency to at least give him credit for taking the responsibility and paying the price, and never once asked about those checks, about the president of their party that I'm sure they genuinely believe in. So it's a remarkable hypocrisy that I wish I could have seen more from good people who are Republicans supporting Donald Trump.
Lenny, I have a quick question unrelated to this that goes back to the impeachment of Bill Clinton. That's when you became one of the most prominent lawyers in America in your defense of President Clinton. And that's when the country met Lindsey Graham for the first time. He was a member of the House Judiciary Committee who was a prosecutor of the case against Bill Clinton in the Senate impeachment trial. And today, I'm not sure you're aware of this, Lindsey Graham had a meeting with the president in which he told the president to follow the Bill Clinton model in handling himself in the presidency while under investigation, and just do the business of the president and stay away from the investigation. And he said to the president, according to Lindsey Graham himself, that Bill Clinton is a good model. for the president to follow. Did you ever think you would live to see the day where Bill Clinton impeachment prosecutor Lindsey Graham would be telling a Republican president to follow the model of Bill Clinton when under investigation?
Let me think about this. No. I got to know Lindsey Graham after debating many times on television, and his friendship with Senator McCain and a good friend of mine, Joe Lieberman, is another way I got to know him. And all I can say about Senator Graham is as much about him I like, but the disappointment is that in honor of John McCain, he is supporting a president who disparaged John McCain as not being a hero because he got captured as missing in action and as a prisoner of war, excuse me. And so I just find a great disappointment in Lindsey Graham, even though we still have a friendship. I'm just utterly baffled that he would, after all that he said about Donald Trump during his presidential campaign and his close friendship with John McCain, that he would still be that supportive of President Trump.
Well, I'm going to have much more to say about what Lindsey Graham said today at the end of the show tonight. Lanny Davis, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Lawrence.
Really
for all
appreciate
the
it.
time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.